The South Sea Company was one of the most important companies in the history of the world. They were primarily involved in the whaling industry, which was everything. Whale oil was the lubrication of economics at the time. They created the first sort of stock pump and dump, essentially, and it's arguable that they might have initially started by accident, but then they realized that their company wasn't making any money anymore as whale oil was going out of fashion, slavery was going out of fashion, and all the other stuff they were shipping was not profitable, but they had this massive empire that they wanted to keep going. And so they got the idea, like, well, what if we can start selling stock specifically to influential, wealthy people? Well, their biggest critic was Sir Isaac Newton, who was, I believe, the head of the Treasury at the time. And they, over time, convinced him that it would be a really great idea to invest his own money. And then once he's invested his own money, see if he can get the King of England to invest the nation's money and his own money and all these other things. Well,
he's presiding of the Royal Mint, which is where we were today.
Yes.
He's working out of that.
Correct.
That case,
and because
original Ponzi scheme.
It is the original Ponzi scheme. And so the fact that Newton was able to be convinced, he was the most respected man in the country as far as money and most other sciences were concerned. So when Newton jumped on board, then all the regular people of England did too. They're like, well, if he's in, I'm in. And then people kept buying the stock. So the company kept issuing more stock to sell more stock to people, but the company was way underwater, another pun for you. And ultimately the whole thing collapsed, and it was the first.
Is that like Trump jumping on BTC?
It's so I've drawn a very similar conclusion. So if you look at a company like MicroStrategy, for example, it's a very similar thing. They don't produce anything. They're essentially a defunct software company, so they've become a treasury company.
MicroStrategy is
Michael Saylor's company.
Yeah.
And so they've become a Bitcoin treasury company, which means buy our stock because it's kind of a leverage play on BTC, and you already missed the biggest run up on BTC ever, and therefore this is your next chance to maybe get really wealthy. So naturally, he's made it over the course of 3 or 4 years, went from being pretty broke to now, golfs with the president of Mar-a-Lago, and now there's a US Strategic Bitcoin Reserve and a bunch of these kind of things. I think there's a lot of very similar things getting stacked up in the same way. All the smart people, like your BlackRocks, and Larry Fink said it was a bad idea for years, and now BlackRock's got a big Bitcoin ETF, and that retail's got to keep buying, keep getting in there, and there's a lot of parallels to the South Sea bubble.
They're saying things like, even if you don't own a bit of Bitcoin now, you're going to be penniless in years to come. They're saying you should have at least 10% of a Bitcoin, which is, still like 10 grand or something to get one. But they're still saying, even though it's up there, if you don't get one now, classic.
The rhetoric is very, very dangerous. I don't know how it's going to play out. I don't know when the bubble's going to burst, but something that is based on zero intrinsic value and nobody's producing value on it, in it, or with it, and it's got what, $3-4 trillion worth of market cap for some reason.
Well, we know that reason is basically comes down to Tether, doesn't it? Tether's been,
almost entirely.
So they tell us that Bitcoin can't be hyperinflated because it has a cap supply of 21 million, but
right.
Of course nothing is capping the amount of Tether being produced,
Correct.
Which is going onto the exchanges, buying Bitcoin, pushing the price up. Can they just continue to print Tether forever? Why is the SEC not investigating Tether?
Well, Tether, for a long time, I've been saying Tether should go out of business for about the last decade now, but they have now become the largest bondholder of U.S. debt. So now the
largest.
Now they've got Trump
the
over
largest.
Wow.
Like Tether owns more U.S. debt than China.
Oh.
So
who's going to pull the plug on Tether?
Who's going to pull the plug on Tether?
Man. Yeah.
I think what we could see over the next 10 years, if things play out the way they want it to play out, is we're going to see some former executive of Tether become the Treasury Secretary of the United States. I think that's the game they are playing. I think that's how they see it playing out.
Wow.
And it could happen. Depends if the bubble bursts first,
Too big to fail.
Yeah. But they're working on becoming too big to fail as their primary means of integrating themselves into power. They're trying to replace the current pillars with themselves.
Is there any stablecoin that's okay in your mind?
I mean, stablecoins are a fiat asset derivative of a fiat asset, which is a derivative of another fiat asset. I mean, it's all insane.
goes.
It's I mean, you're arguing about the quality of unicorn farts, you know.
So no.
Yeah.
What I'm interested to understand is though that if obviously you can't hyperinflate Bitcoin because there's a cap supply, and like as Satoshi was saying last night, it's infinitely divisible. So theoretically, the price of Bitcoin would go up rather than down because it's not being hyperinflated. But if you're hyperinflating it through the back door of Tether, what does that mean for the purchasing price of BTC? Surely it should actually be going down because it is actually getting hyperinflated. So
the asset should go up relative to the industries that it disrupts, and it's disrupted essentially nothing. And so the fact that it is what it is, it shows clear fraud. And we know that the people that are involved in Tether and BTC, many of them are convicted frauds. Some of them have paid fines and restitution and all that for fraud. And so it's not even arguable that these folks are frauds. They are just...
I mean, the American Consumer Research Group spent millions of dollars putting a whole campaign out there explaining how it was a fraud.
Well, and plainly, I mean, look at the New York Attorney General's office. They were convicted of fraud and had to pay fines for running a deep fractional reserve, for lying to their investors, lying to their customers, for saying that they had deposits on things that they never had. And so they were inflating the asset in order to control the price of Bitcoin, especially at critical moments. And that's the really interesting thing, is that it's about timing. You can control an asset in a way that just kind of pumps it forever, but that gets you caught out. For them, it's about knocking it down when appropriate, knocking it up when appropriate, and that allows them to launder money, launder their tethers back into real dollars on a sufficient schedule to make it that they are able to pass their attestation periods and these things. So they've got a very well-oiled machine that keeps them out of prison, and again, they've made themselves possibly too big to fail. And the consequences is that the Federal Reserve is problematic enough. The IRS and the way that all these things function is predatory, and this is another layer of predatory practice on top of that predatory layer of financial practice. And
I mean, I guess it's interesting because the whole kind of Bitcoin thing was considered to be outside of the system, and as you pointed out, which is a very interesting point, they've managed to actually integrate it and to embed it into the very core of the American economy. And so what does that mean, really? That's what I wonder, is like, is it a bubble that can never burst? I mean, a fundamental aspect of a bubble is that no one sees it coming. That's what makes a bubble, right? So can it fail? Like, what do you think? I mean,
I think it depends how you define failure.
Right.
The interesting thing is that Bitcoin is an economic system. It achieves its balance and perpetuity through a very specific set of economic principles. And it's broken a lot of key ones, BTC specifically. And in breaking them, they created the Civil War, which created the other assets, the Bitcoin Cash, BSV, and other things. But the question is can you run a debt empire forever? And I think history tells us no, but we also don't know what we don't know. It a little bit reminds me today of someone like William the Conqueror. Had he showed up here and gotten his head cut off within the first 6 hours, we wouldn't be talking about him today. But when you show up and you successfully kill the right people and plant the right flags, and everyone's like, you know what, I'm not fighting him anymore, then he becomes the new king. He changes the culture, the language,
But also he starts marrying. They will start marrying, and it becomes like
you integrate into what was. You show up and say, all right, look, I've swung the sword around. I don't want to have to hurt anyone else. Who would like to come golf with me instead? And that's how you build.
You said that Tether now owns more debt than China.
They're the largest U.S. Treasury bond.
That's a new. It says here in 1720 the government allowed the company to take over part of the national debt, sending the stock prices. So
it's how all central banks were started. I've said I have called them the Tetheral Reserve Bank for a number of years. people have laughed about it for years, and I keep saying I'm not joking. That's their goal. They want to be new world order central banking of the tech empire that they foresee. People should stop letting them.
So how does this tie?
if you're going to say where is Tether based, right? There's an amazing video online where somebody goes, an undercover journalist, to go into the offices of. It's literally like a shell company in Shanghai with one woman going, Tether, what Tether on the desk? Nobody working there. It's like they have no employees. It's a very interesting video.
I wanted to ask, where's Tether's money coming from? Who's putting money into Tether?
It's a good question.
Well, it's made up magic internet money. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
it's
that's
not-
what it is.
it's
Whoever's
not-
got the computer where they make it up.
They just
Tether's
issue the
meant, they're meant to
tokens.
get an actual.
Yeah.
They're meant to get an actual fiat dollar and put
So-
it in a bank
They got
account
three.
and
They got
create
2.5
digital
years
twin.
left to do that until the
Clarity.
Genius Act comes out.
People who buy the coins actually pay Tether. They
Correct.
can create coins, but then people buy the
They get the
coins,
fiat. It's a
and
bait and
they
switch.
actually
Yes.
trade actual money
Yeah.
for the coins, thinking that their coin is backed by the same dollar that they just spent.
So
on
they're,
it.
But the
they're,
reality is
that
Tether's
is
giving
the
it to the
whole
government to buy more bonds.
To buy
their
more bonds.
official
issue
story
more Tether.
Exactly.
is that
What are we supposed to believe?
institutions buy Tether so that they can take Tether to buy Bitcoin. That's the official story. But is BlackRock going to Tether for liquidity? Is Michael Saylor going to Tether for liquidity? Like, the answer is no. There are no institutions that say, you know what, get Tether on the phone. We're going to make a big purchase.
Yeah.
They just buy, like, most of them go to Coinbase custody or somebody and say, hey, I want to, or Galaxy Digital, or what, they buy it direct. Why the hell would you create a middleman?
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. And there's no evidence that they have any institutional clients, but they've sold that bill of goods. And the problem is they're all complicit. That all the exchanges look at it and they're like, yeah, if we call them out, we're out of business too. They all need Tether to be successful. So your Coinbase and Kraken, when they're all like, hey, we're making Bitcoin great for retail, like, they are all crooks and they're complicit in a massive fraud.
I've got a question. In historically, looking at these, like the
Can we let
same
this,
problem going
these
on.
people through? Sorry.
The same problem going on. Has anybody ever been like made a criminal charge for this? kind
Tether
of-
was criminally charged.
I mean, more in the history,
Oh.
like through the history. And is it ever, or is it?
So think of the most hated people in world history, and those are the people that tried to fix central banking.
Hitler?
Well, no,
Among
JFK.
JFK.
You know what I mean? Yeah. We're not hated, but like, you know. Yeah.
So
demonized.
it's like I said, if you try to start a revolution and unseat the people in power and you fail, you know, they figure out you were a pedophile and a Satanist and whatever, and you know, everybody spits on your grave. And if you win, they have tours at your house and talk about you forever. So it's this is what it is. Like, we live under the umbrella of the people who won.
That's why it's called his story.
Yeah.
Guys, I want to take a moment because we're all together. Should we do a video message for Satoshi? Because